Now, we all know the story. The muskets, the cannons, a bunch of guys in wool coats arguing about freedom and liberty while freezing half to death in boiling shoe leather in Valley Forge. That's what they put in the textbooks. It's all over the place. We all know that. However, here's some shit that they left out. Long before shots even were fired, there was already a war going on. Not one involving muskets and cannons, just one involving a woman in a farmhouse in Plymouth, Massachusetts, absolutely dismantling a royal governor's reputation with a quill pen and a chip on her shoulder the size of Boston Harbor. Her name was Mercy Otis Warren. She didn't fight the British with a rifle. She humiliated the out of them in print, anonymously, for years, while hosting the world's most dangerous tea parties. All right, let's go get it. The classic image of a colonial parlor room. Fine china, polite conversation, powdered wigs, making the small talk about the weather. Now, picture the same room being used to plan the psychological collapse of British authority in Massachusetts. That, ladies and gentlemen, was Mercy Warren's living room. Mercy Otis was born in 1728 in Barnstable, Massachusetts, into a family that pretty much spit out revolutionaries. Her father was a judge. Her brother, James Otis Jr., was one of the loudest anti-British voices in the colony. Fun fact, the guy is actually credited with the phrase, taxation without representation. Mercy unfortunately didn't get the same schooling as her brothers because apparently in the 1700s having a uterus is considered a pretty serious academic handicap.
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
She was, however, tutored alongside them. She sat in on their lessons and had real access to classical education, Latin, history, literature, the whole shelf. Luckily for her, being surrounded by intellectuals basically handed her the intellectual equivalent of a loaded weapon and was like, hey, it's cool to have. Just don't go flashing it around outside, okay? In 1754, she married James Warren, a Massachusetts politician. Once he got elected to state legislature in 1766, their home in Plymouth became ground zero for revolutionary talk. Starting to rain. John Adams, Sam Adams, John Hancock, these guys were showing up at her house for dinner and conversation. And Mercy just wasn't hanging out in the corner. The men in her circle were drilling militias and writing legal arguments about representation. Mercy picked a different kind of weapon. She started using satire. Sharp, because it was published without her name on it. Newspapers like the Massachusetts Spy, the Boston Gazette, it spread through the colonies. Pretty much social media today. Nobody can really trace where something started. Everybody hands it on. These guys in 18th century America are reading the lines out loud in bars. They quoted her villains in their own letters. And I mean, that's shit's going viral. In March of 1772, Mercy published her first major shot across the bow, a play called The Adulator. I don't know if I said it right or not. We'll get it figured out in the end. It started running anonymously in installments in the Massachusetts Spy, with a fuller pamphlet version following not long after. The plot is set in the fictional country called Upper Servia, which fooled absolutely nobody. The villain is a power-hungry official named Rapatio. And Rapatio is Massachusetts Royal Governor Thomas Hutchison, wearing the thinnest disguise in colonial literature.
Well, if it isn't our old friend.
The name itself wasn't exactly a subtle nod either. Historians tie it to the word rapacious, greedy, grasping. But at least one source ties it directly to the word, making the villain's name itself a vicious little jab at the abuse of power. Mercy wasn't writing the very reasonable concerns. She was writing this guy is basically tyranny in a waistcoat. His inner circle gets names like dupe and gripeball. Being quiet about it was not the fucking point. Recognition was the name of the game that she was playing. This was political satire with the serial numbers filed off. Rapatio opens the play gloating about how he's crushed the spirit of liberty in his own people, that a day is coming when, in Mercy's words, murders, blood, and carnage shall crimson the streets. 3 years before Lexington and Concord, she's already writing the outcome she saw coming.
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
We could call it character assassination, political propaganda, psychological warfare, whatever label you want to put on it. Mercy understood something that politicians still understand today. If you can make people laugh at the guy in charge, you've already stolen some of his authority. Well, the play worked because patriots started using her characters' names as stand-ins for real political figures. Then in 1773, a batch of Hutchinson's private letters become public. A lot of his letters came out showing that he advocated for measures that patriots interpreted as attack on colonial liberties. Well, Warren answered with a sequel. The defeat brings our villain Rapatio back for another round. This time it's written into political collapse. Let's pump the brakes a little bit. So Mercy Warren did not personally take down Thomas Hutchinson. Letters affair, formal petitions for Massachusetts for his removal, and British politics back in London all mattered a lot more than one funny-ass play. Hutchinson was out of his post by early 1774, and she didn't do that alone. But I'll tell you what, she did, however, spend the previous 2 years turning his ass into a recognizable villain the entire colony already hated by name. So no, she didn't personally fire the royal governor of Massachusetts, but she made goddamn sure that when his career started catching on fire, that the whole ass colony was standing around toasting some marshmallows. Mercy Otis Warren lived under every restriction the 18th century put on women. She couldn't vote, she couldn't hold office, she wasn't able to publish a major work under her own name until 1790, when Poems, Dramatic, and Miscellany finally put Mercy Otis Warren on the cover instead of nothing at all. And yet from inside her little box, she helped set the actual tempo of the American Revolution. Her house wasn't exactly a revolutionary headquarters in the military sense. Nobody was stacking muskets behind sofas and shit. But ideas were being traded there constantly, and Mercy was exceptionally good at turning those words into ammunition. The British had an army, and she had stationery. And I want you to guess which one was cheaper. By one account, in November of 1775, while her husband James was writing a letter to John Adams, Mercy jumped in to add her own line, reportedly telling Congress it was time to stop piddling at the threshold, and instead leap into open rebellion. Piddling. That's such a fun word. Piddling. And that story comes down to us through her circle's own letters rather than some independently verified transcript, so take it as a well-documented anecdote rather than gospel, but even as that, it tracks. Apparently, Congress was still debating the revolution while Mercy was standing behind them going, "For the love of all that is holy, go rebel or go home." She kept a running correspondence with some of the biggest players in the game, John and Abigail Adams, George Washington, later Thomas Jefferson, who subscribed to her work for himself. Her friendship with John Adams in particular ran for decades, which it ran like all of his other relationships. Intellectual partnerships had a great thing, then eventual falling out, but for a long stretch he leaned on her insight and pushed her to keep writing. Historians would later hand her the nickname the conscience of the American Revolution, because she was out here keeping it real one letter at a time. Going back to the cheaper thing, let's talk some numbers. It's about to get boring, so this is the part where you want to make a sandwich and just really do something else that's cool. A lot of people walk around thinking the American Revolution kicked off because King George woke up one day feeling greedy. Britain had just finished fighting the French and Indian War, which was really just the American front of a much bigger fight called the 7 Years' War. France and basically half of Europe against Britain and its allies. And this war was brutal on the British Treasury. Before it started, Britain's national debt sat around £75 million. By the time it ended in 1763, that debt had nearly doubled to somewhere around £133 million. Interest payments alone were eating up more than half of everything the British government spent in a year. And it didn't stop when the war ended. Britain decided to keep roughly 10,000 troops stationed in North America afterward, supposedly to manage the newly won territory and keep peace with the natives. That standing army cost somewhere in the neighborhood of £300,000 a year. Every single year, just sitting there. So Parliament looked at that math and they came to a real simple conclusion that colonies benefited from the war and from that protection. So the colonies should help pay for it. That's the fucking origin story behind the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act, the Townsend Duties, all of it. It wasn't random cruelty. It was government trying to fix shit.
That was diabolical.
Problem is, nobody bothered asking the colonists if they agreed with any of that math. That's where the taxation without representation comes in. Now compare that mess. You got the war debt, you got a standing army that's costing you money, the tax bills that nobody asked for. Mercy Warren's weapon of choice was a quill and some paper and a sympathetic printer. That's it. She wasn't moving 10,000 troops or servicing 130 million pounds of debt. She was writing plays in a farmhouse, and it worked on a target that the British military machine couldn't touch with any amount of money.
Say what you would mean it, bro.
Which was reputation of the British authority itself. The group in 1775 imagined a mock cast of loyalist officials scheming against their own neighbors right before the shooting started. The target wasn't Hutchison anymore. The whole premise was that royal officials deserved respect and obedience. And once Bostonians were openly making fun of this their governor's own leaked letters and laughing at fictional versions of the men running their government, pretty much the entire psychological grip of the royal authority was getting doused in a pretty fair amount of KY. That's the actual weapon here, not the paper, not the ink. Everybody knew who Rapatio was, and that's where satire turns dangerous, because now you're not telling people what to think, you're handing them a fucking nickname that they can weaponize. And let me tell you something about weaponized nicknames and having the last name Falk.
Oh, that's foreshadowing.
See these fun little weaponized nicknames? So they show up in the funniest of places. Every little tavern, every dinner table argument, every relationship. Then the Americans won, wrote a constitution, and basically said, okay, let's build a brand new government. Mercy looked at the proposed constitution, and if her writing is any indication, it is a thought that is remarkably close to no. In 1788, she published Observations on the New Constitution, a sharp anti-federalist argument against ratifying a document that, in her view, handed too much power to a strong central government without any guaranteed protections for individual liberty.
In the business, we call this foreshadowing.
And we all know that she wasn't the only voice pushing that argument, but her work added real weight to the political pressure that eventually helped produce the Bill of Rights. Then, in 1805, I don't know why, I just noticed that I hold this mic like this. 1805, she's 77 years old. She published a 3-volume history of the rise, progress, and termination of the American Revolution. One of the first full histories of the war by anyone who had actually lived through it. Thomas Jefferson was one of the original subscribers and ordered copies for himself and his whole cabinet. Imagine writing a book. The sitting president says, yeah, I'll take one. And I'm going to need one for everybody here too, please. She's not in the book that most people read in school, which is dumb, because Mercy Otis Warren was doing something we still like to pretend is a modern invention. I mean, look at them all. I'll wait. No, take your time. See any of them you know, any of them you listen to? That's right. Using information, ridicule, and public opinion to make powerful people look smaller than they wanted to be. And let me tell you, I am not advocating for it, but it is sure the fun. She didn't have a TV. She wasn't on social media. She didn't have a podcast. She had a quill and somebody who was cool enough to let her print it. Apparently, that's all she needed. That one's not in the book. Go tell somebody. You like the channel? Hit the subscribe. Hit the bell. Hit the little thumbs up thingy. Leave a comment. Tell people. That's really all I can ask for. Go check out the store. Shameless plug, I know, but still, go check out the store. It's cool. There's stuff for everybody. This is on Spotify too, not in the book. So if the mug doesn't do it, you can listen to me. If that doesn't do it, I can't. You just go on, I guess. Just find somebody else. All right, that's enough.
She wrote her name in smoke across the sugar room, while all the powdered men wore virtue like perfume. She kept a kettle hot and sharpened every word. A woman with a pen is a blade they never heard. Oh, Mercy on the stage, oh mercy in the book. She smiled like a curtain called and took a longer look. They called her bold for sport, they called her mild for shame, but every polite little line was a match in a loaded frame. Mercy at the table,